Hello everyone, I'm Taaka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. And this is one of our nuts and bolts session. And today we have the whole squad with us. Hi, Gillian. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Taaka.
So happy to have you all. And we needed the whole squad to talk about today's topic. And maybe even before I get to the title of the topic, I'll start with why we're having this conversation. Robert, you and I know of the situation, but recently we were on an assignment where we were dealing with a leader who was just exemplary in so many ways. I mean, this guy had such huge impact with his company. The difference he was making was amazing. He had started this thing from scratch. It had just grown to enormous proportions. So in many respects, his story was inspiring, right? But he had a huge problem that was starting to impact the business. And the issue was his ego. It's not often something we talk about many times in the business schools where they're doing leadership. They're not going to talk about this issue of your ego. But we are starting to see it's such a huge issue that this session, this nuts and bolts, is about strategies to manage your ego in an African context. So I think I'll start with you, Gillian. Okay. I don't want to assume that all our listeners, those who are watching us, I don't want to assume everybody understands what we mean by an ego. And particularly we're talking about an overly inflated ego. But let me start. Is ego a bad thing?
So ego is not necessarily a bad thing. But let me first kind of maybe define what ego is, just to put it in context for everyone. In the simplest term, your ego is how you view yourself. It is your sense of self, your sense of identity. And that view, that perception that you have of yourself is influenced in many cases by how you were brought up. It's influenced by your social circles, the kind of friends you have, even where you went to school. All of those things feed into who you are, your beliefs, your attitudes, the kind of church you go to. All of those things impact your view of yourself. Now, depending on the kind of life that you have had growing up and what you've been able to accomplish, some people have achieved some things. Sometimes not even a lot. Sometimes it's like small things. And just one small achievement and suddenly you think that you are it. And you are just like God's gift to the earth. But so an overly inflated ego comes when your opinion of yourself is so high that you lose sight of what is important in life. You lose sight of who is important. In a work context, you begin to devalue people around you. You lose empathy for situations around you because you think that everything basically rises and falls on you. And so that's when it gets bad. And so that's how in nuts and bolts terms, I would define ego as a baseline and then ego in a bad context. So it's interesting that you said that, with this situation that you were in, you had this guy who was a brilliant leader.
Yeah.
But a bad ego.
Yeah. Overly inflated
ego. And that thing can cripple you and destroy everything that you have worked for. Yeah. So I think it's really, really key that we're having this discussion, and looking forward to it.
Yeah. You notice we're saying overly inflated because we're making sure we're not conflating that or confusing that with a healthy ego.
Exactly.
So Gillian, just before I move to Robert, what would you say a healthy ego is, and why could it be important?
Okay, so a healthy ego, it shows in somebody who is confident in themselves. It shows in somebody who is they're comfortable in their own skin. Yes. So they are not worried about engaging with somebody who is smarter than them.
Yes.
They see it as an opportunity to learn rather than a threat to making them look bad. They see a healthy ego is one that is, I would say, kind. Because when you have a good view of yourself, then you don't keep everything under your arm. Like, you're willing to give of yourself, you're willing to give of your time, you're willing to give. So you find that people with healthy egos are actually very generous people. Not money necessarily, but generous with time with knowledge, with all of those things. So that is how I would say you see it show up. And in a work context, that's what makes brilliant leaders, because they're willing to give of themselves. They're not threatened by anybody around them. So if you think of past podcasts that we've done, even one that we did recently about leaders who do too much, they're not threatened by having a strong leadership team or a strong second in command. It makes for a healthy work environment. So healthy ego equals healthy work environment, and like healthy family and friends.
I wanted to just give an example of when egos become a problem, when you start telling people and asking people, do you know who I am?
Yes, our friend.
Do you know who I know?
Do you know who I am?
Do you know who I am? Then you should be.
And that's a big cultural thing, because it shows up in ways of, refer to me this way. So let's say somebody has the title doctor. You dare not call them by their first name.
So please always remember, Gillian is Dr. Gillian.
Some people will say Dr. Gillian Hammah, PhD.
So I keep telling people, I said, I like my name. Gillian is my name. I like it. That's the name I've lived with. But I have had engagements where I am in a meeting and you call the person by their first name and they're like, no, I'm Dr. something. Please call me Dr. whatever. And right away it throws everything off.
But I want to, and I like the way we are differentiating between the overinflated, because I think what's coming out, and I hope our audience is picking up, that all of us need an ego. We need an ego to show up, to be confident, and particularly as a leader, to influence others, you need an ego. And again, when we start to think about it sometimes from a perspective of gender, youth, some of the intersectionalities, and some of the identities, when we think about our context, particularly identities which when you're working in workplaces, the identities where people look down on you, that can lead, as Gillian, as you were saying, depending on how you're raised, depending on your context, many times patriarchy can lead you to not have enough of an ego. You're not confident enough. So in those cases, I'd say to somebody, hey, actually, you need more ego. You need to think more of yourself. For others, bring it down. For you, raise it up a notch. Okay. So we're clear on the first. The problem we're talking about here is the overly inflated ego. So maybe before we get to how to deal with it, Robert, let me come to you. Why are we even talking about this in terms of, because we're seeing it a lot, why do you think this is such an issue? Why are we seeing it a lot on this continent?
I think the first thing is our definition, how we look at leadership in our context, because once somebody is given a leadership role as a pastor or as a boss, as a CEO, what comes to our mind is the fact that the person is above us, and the person sees themselves as that. So then what they do is that they behave in that sense. They have to live up to that expectation of, in our context, that I am above. So for instance, I've been in government before, where I work for a minister, where in the office, when somebody is coming in, everybody has to stand up. And if you don't do it, it means that you are not looking at how high the person is. Already we set the background in our context for people to feel important and therefore need to show their ego and show off that I am the leader. There's also this thing around our culture and our religion and the kind of things we learn from them. So for instance, who is the person who leads us in our religion? How do we see the person? How do we put the person in? So for instance, a pastor. So our pastor, when you go to churches, we have to bow to them. We have to, we create this environment where people need to live up to a particular expectation. And therefore, they start behaving in certain ways that we create an environment for them to grow in. And therefore, need to behave in that manner. So if we don't see that, we don't see the person commanding people, we say, this is not a good leader. This person should be commanding people. Should be telling people how important they are. Creating an environment for them to show off that I can heal, I can do all those things. So those are some of the things that contribute. And then also,
but before I really want to have on this, because I think this is important, because what I'm hearing you say, and I've seen this so often, is that you may come into a leadership role without a huge ego.
Exactly.
But the leadership culture we have created because of our societal culture, our leadership models, all the trappings of leadership, the hierarchy will tend to, if you are not careful, inflate your ego.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay.
So that's what would happen because of the environment we create. So people feel that they need to. Sometimes it's not like you said, it's not that somebody wants to, but they need to get up to that level to make it happen. So even our presidents and all those people, the way we behave towards them and how they need to respond. If they don't respond,
trappings of leadership.
Exactly. So if they don't respond in a particular manner, we are like, there's something wrong here. This leader should be showing off. They should be, then we feel that it's even in our homes, even when we've done this, even like you said, the patriarchy and all of that, and how it even influence leadership in the home, where the fathers must do certain things, and even research we've done around gender-based violence, where we say the leader of the house, you must beat the children, you must be the one whipping so all these things make people feel like I need to show off, I need to be there. So those are the things I've realized that really influence the way these things are done.
Let me just quickly add something there. What I've also realized is not only when you step into like a certain leadership context and it then almost boosts your ego for you, but you tend to find that family as well are pushing that overly inflated ego. So you will have somebody in a family who is now a doctor. The family is the one that will go and announce it everywhere. They will want to put you in front. They themselves will say, do not refer to them by their first name. This is doctor. This is doctor. It's so, you find that because what it does is some of these status symbols help to validate the other people around you. And that is what then, and so if you are not humble in yourself and you are not careful in yourself, after a while, even if you resist it at first, you tend to fall into it and get so used to it that when the day somebody doesn't pick up your bag and carry it, you're like, oh, what happened?
Exactly.
Why do I have to now carry my bag myself? So it's that thing that there are so many things that are pushing egos to be, it's so easy to have an overly inflated ego. And it doesn't necessarily mean the person is bad or started out that way. But the situation sometimes pushes you there. And if you're not strong in your own skin,
it's so
that is where you lose sight of things. And then you become...
You're so right. It's almost like what you're both saying is a followership.
Exactly.
Those around. I remember someone giving us a story. They were in political office. And they didn't want, there's a whole conversation we're having in this continent. We've recently had it in Ghana about politicians moving around with sirens. And pushing everybody off the road. So they came into office and they decided they didn't want to be the same. This couple who are in leadership role, they're like, we're not going to do all the siren thing. Only for the people, their constituents, to come and say, how will we know you've passed? If you don't have the siren.
You see,
he's a big man. So it's also recognizing that it's the leadership culture. And leadership culture is not just what the leader does, it's the expectation of the follower and those around them.
Exactly.
All right. For that role that they have stepped into.
Is there something also, Robert, about feedback?
Yes, I think the idea around people not giving feedback to leaders, and telling them when they are stepping out of line. So if a leader starts doing certain things, and because the person is creating this impression, so it's difficult for you to go forward to say, this is what we saw, or this is the thing that you did. So it's always difficult for people to reflect and see what is happening to them in the part of when they are getting an inflated ego. So because you don't get feedback, then at the end of the day you feel, okay, I'm fine, and this is how it's supposed to be. So then that's all that there is. So that's what happens in that space.
We've had in some of our leadership training sessions where we've talked about the importance as a leader of getting feedback, and the leaders will say to us, Taaka, we know, but we ask, but they don't tell us.
Yes.
And so we often say that there's a particular way to ask for feedback. If you're just generally asking, so people, how am I doing? That's not going to give you feedback, because we're so built in culturally not to give our seniors feedback. So it's learning what are the right ways to do it. I would say get very specific. And we'll come to the strategies later. In terms
but I don't know, there's a story, and I don't know whether it's a fable in the African context, but the story about the emperor with no clothes.
Yes.
Where you've got this guy who goes to get, for those of you who do not know the story, you have this guy, a king, not a guy, a king, goes to a tailor to go and get this beautiful suit made, and the tailor I can't remember why the tailor ended up doing what he was doing, but the tailor basically was going around him, measuring and doing all of those things. I think the tailor didn't have the proper cloth. So he went around, designed this beautiful outfit for the king, told the king it was so beautiful. All the king's leaders, his core leadership team that we say you need, a second in command, a strong leadership team, nobody had the heart to tell the king that the tailor actually didn't make anything. So the king thought he was wearing this beautiful thing. There was no cloth. He was actually naked. Went into the town for a parade, and every single last person kept saying, oh, what a beautiful outfit. It's so gorgeous. Nobody could tell the king that he was naked, and that is what happens.
But then it ends. Don't forget the end to it. Then a little boy starts laughing. A little child starts laughing and says, but the king has no clothes. So it took an innocent child who was not inducted in that organizational culture of silence to be like,
you're actually not wearing anything.
Yes, you're not actually wearing it, and that's how the king.
So that's what's happening.
Oh, okay. So so we have a sense. We've got a clarity on what do we mean by hyperinflated ego. We know some of the reasons why we're seeing it, and realize even the best of us, with the best of intentions, if we're not careful, can fall into it. What are the negative impacts? We've alluded to some of them, but what are the negative impacts? I know for one of the things I have seen is people don't speak up. In that context, we went into to that particular company. We found it was only until we did the one-on-one interviews that things were starting to come up about what was going wrong. So very similar to the emperor type thing. But not just speaking up in terms of feedback, but speaking up in terms of what's going wrong in the company, what's not working in the company. They would go to meetings, they'd have these virtual meetings, and not one person would say a word. Because they're like, this one, it's their space. So that's one of the things I see as a downside.
The interesting thing about that is people don't speak up to the leader, but they talk
amongst themselves,
and they're always talking. So the moment they leave that meeting, everybody's talking and complaining about everything. They will complain even outside of the company to friends, family, clients. Sometimes, everybody but the leader. So that thing about people not speaking up, it is so important.
It can be very toxic because
it is.
You don't have the issue. You see, when they're complaining, if at least it's complaining in the session, in the meeting, then you're able to do something about it. But if they're complaining in the cafeteria, in their offices to the client, then you're not able to do so. That's one of the things. Robert, what are some of the things you have also seen? What are some of the negative?
I've also seen, people leading their leaders into their graves, because of your inflated ego, because of course people will not tell you, like we just saw the emperor,
Yes.
you will not be told. People can't tell you that this is what is happening, and so then you start really doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
You start getting, and even we've had these things where we had one time in this country where a minister of state signed some things. I remember that time when they say Pampers and Chichinga.
Oh yes.
That time, yeah.
Yes.
So people in your ministry as a minister or in your office as a CEO, people will see that you are doing the wrong thing. They know that this is the wrong thing, and they will not tell you.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, because if they tell you, you are going to either flare up, or the way you will handle the situation will make them feel like, no, you let him go, let her go. If she dies,
she will see.
We'll be here and we'll see exactly.
Yes.
Or,
You hear it, and you actually hear people say those exact words.
Yes.
Like they're not even hiding it.
Yeah,
And then he knows it all.
Yes.
leave them. They'll decide they can do it. Let them do it. So and you see that leaders sometimes, and I think it relates to what you said, the leaders doing too much. Then the idea is that because you know that this is going to happen, then leads for leaders also doing too much. Because people won't tell you that you are doing too much, or they'll say,
well, since you know it, you do it.
That's the kind of thing. So that's what I see really happening to people, and I think it has happened to me before. Let me be honest, and that's why I love this, because when I started leadership, before I met Taaka, and I went through this leadership training for about a year, I thought leadership was this thing where you must be the boss. When you are coming, everybody must, be, not bow to you, but be recognized that you are coming. And when something is I was in my office all the time, nobody came to me. Nobody came to say anything. You only do a meeting, and after the meeting, everybody goes as if nothing had happened. Everything you bring, everybody will be saying, okay, yes. And so immediately you see people saying yes to you without really, making effort to tell you what is wrong. Be careful. It means something is wrong and people are not really coming to you. So that's one reason why I really think that leaders should be aware of this kind of thing when it comes around them.
Hi, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show. Gillian, what have you seen?
Two other points that I would touch on about the negative impact of overly inflated egos going unchecked. One is the toxic workplace. And with the toxic workplace, I find that there are levels where it's gradual, or graduated, maybe that's the right word, but it starts off with people griping, people complaining because they're not talking to the leader, but they still want what is inside of them to be heard. So they talk to themselves, they talk to other leaders in the company, they talk to their friends, their family, who are also potential customers of that company. They talk to sometimes even clients. So you get this murmuring going on. Then it moves from there to them seeing the leader going, and there's a term that I've heard, a Ghanaian term that, let them go and hit their head against the wall. So you see the leader heading to the wall and you're like, it's okay, let him go. Since he says he knows everything, let him go. Beyond that, within the toxicity, you also have people who will do things to harm the company.
Yeah.
Or they may see somebody else doing something that will negatively impact the company, and they'll back off. They won't say anything.
Yeah.
So toxic is not just about griping and complaining. Toxic is anything that brings damage to an organization.
Yes.
And so we need to recognize that one ego can set in motion so many different things. It's like a train, a runaway train that it just keeps picking up speed. And if you're not careful, it will just run off the track and take everybody with them.
I just wanted to add up about how toxicity also is another thing where, for instance, I always want to share my experience. I, in some parts of my leadership life, used to get very ill because of this ego thing. Because your head will be aching like, why is everybody doing the wrong thing? I want them to do the right thing. You know, and your head is aching and you forget that you are becoming the Lord and you're forgetting how to engage with people and feel free and let things go. So even you get sick and you make other people sick. And then another thing I realized is also just experience also people start pretending.
Yes, they can't be authentic around you. They can't fail around you because again,
they keep pretending and giving you, worshiping you and all of that. And they are not their authentic selves. So they don't give the best of themselves, you know, in that situation.
And the interesting thing about that is, which kind of leads to the next point, is that most times leaders actually are able to sense that this is happening. They just don't know how to fix it. So, but they realize that they get to a point where nobody's pushing back, nobody is saying anything negative. Everybody's just saying yes, yes, yes. And most times too, they will have one or two people who will bring back what is being said around them. So they are aware that there's murmuring and complaining and those things going on, but they just don't know how to kind of stop it in its tracks. So what that ends up doing is it creates for very lonely leadership, where now you begin to feel isolated.
Yes.
You begin to feel like you're on your own. And so then you get defensive because you feel like, well, okay, if I'm on my own, then let me just do things the way that I want to do it. So again, it's like one ego can set in motion so many
much
different
trouble.
things.
Yes.
Those would be maybe the two things that I would add.
Okay. All right. So strategies, as we all know, this is a nuts and bolts. The key thing we've come to do is we've got a good sense of the problem. So and we know how to diagnose. If we see this, we know why it's there. But I think let us come to the meat of our conversation around what do you do as a leader to ensure that, because as we've said, you can come in with the best of intentions, but the leadership culture and environment for many of us on this continent is such that if you're unwittingly, if you don't have your eyes all around 360, before you know it, you have this huge ego. So what are the strategies you can use as a leader to ensure that your ego is a healthy, not an overinflated one? Let's start with you, Robert.
I think, like myself, the first thing is change your paradigm. Change the way you think about leadership. You know, you need to see leadership as in a way of, like we normally say, it's influence, getting people. It's not pulling people away from you. So if your ego is pulling people away from you and making you feel ill, like myself, and all of that, then it means that there's something wrong. So you need to change your paradigm. How do you do that? You go for training, like I did. You get coaches, you know, to help you really understand this idea of how are the best leaders doing it? And how can I change my perspective with the environment that I'm in? Because, you know, sometimes when you are doing the right thing as a leader, like you are being serving, you are supporting, people take advantage of it. You know, if you are being nice, like for instance, I tell people, call me Robert, or you can reach me at any time. You know, people take advantage. So it's not just about understanding the definition of leadership or the basis of leadership, but also how do I go around this leadership conversation, understand it in a way that even when I start seeing the challenges, I'm able to address those things within there. So changing the whole paradigm of your leadership.
But I think this is so key because what I'm hearing you say is that, yes, you change your mindset and paradigm of leadership, but it's not enough for you alone.
Exactly.
It's about ensuring that there's a change of paradigm within your entire team or organization, if you're lead, in terms of how people understand leadership. That leadership isn't about a title. Leadership isn't about privilege. Leadership is about service. Leadership is about transformation. Because what we're seeing is that the pressures of the ego are not coming just from you yourself. They're coming from those around you. So it's changing your own paradigm and those around you, around what leadership is. That's strategy number one. Great. Gillian, another strategy.
Yeah, let me jump in here. So maybe another one that I would add is about actually asking for feedback. And so there are two kind of parts to that. One is, first, find people who can give you honest feedback. It is key to identify honest feedback, because not everybody can do it. So you need to be able to find that. Then within that, you actually need to also make sure that when you get the feedback, you receive it in such a way that it encourages and tells people that, yes, you genuinely actually wanted the feedback. You just didn't ask for it for show. And that's what happens. Because sometimes, we go and we say, oh, give me feedback. And then when we get the feedback, you don't talk to the person. Or suddenly you start to punish them.
Yes. Giving you feedback, your face is already.
So you really need to be open to the feedback and demonstrate that you are open to the feedback. Really quick, one of my team members, a marketing manager, she's really good at giving me feedback. And I really appreciate her for that. So she would come to me and she would say, Gillian, sometimes when you're talking to us or we're talking to you, your facial expressions, like you're squeezing your face and all of that, and that makes some of us nervous. Or she would say, you don't shout, you are very quiet, but sometimes the way you speak, even though it's soft, it makes us shake. So so I had to take that feedback. And what I had to say to her is that, okay, fine, I will work on it. But if you see my face twitching or doing things, just prompt me and say, Gillian, remember your face. So in doing that, it showed her that, yes, I was genuinely interested and willing to work on the feedback. So it's really, really important that we ask for feedback. Yes, let it be timely, let it be specific, but receive it. Be willing to receive it and act on it. Show people that.
But this is not easy. All of these things we're saying, I guess we're all recognizing it takes time. It's a journey, because to be able, I know there have been times when I've gotten feedback that I've gotten defensive. You all know it. But it has to be my way, and then my ego, particularly if I'm under pressure, or if I feel I have to deliver results, then my ego gets very, and I notice it's almost a correlation between ego and fear. It's almost as if your ego's connected to that part of your brain, that amygdala, that's trying to keep you safe. So I notice my ego goes up when I feel threatened, that somehow I can't deliver, I can't do this, we may not deliver quality, then it's my way or the highway. So feedback is good. But I think tied to this then, I think I would add on to your two strategies. The importance of showing vulnerability. I think Brené Brown made vulnerability a leadership household name of late, but I think we need to speak a lot more about this, particularly in the African context, because of what you said before, where often we are not used to associating vulnerability with courage or strength. In a context of leadership. But I think what I'm learning a lot more is that it's the brave, courageous ones who are able to show vulnerability. And very practically, what does that mean? If I make a mistake, it's saying, guys, I made a doo-doo. I shouldn't have done that. Can you imagine? I'm really sorry. So admitting
not pushing it off onto another
and blaming
member.
other people. And just owning it and saying, I made a mistake. It was you, and admitting it with humility. I think that's one. The second one is asking for help. You have to be vulnerable to ask for help. To be able to say, actually, I don't think I can handle this. I need help. Who else can do this? And also be able to say, actually, I don't know. There's so much pressure on us as leaders to
Yeah.
always have the right answer. We're leading in a context of increased uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. It would be very normal not to know everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So being able to say, guys, I'm really not sure. Can we figure this out together? That takes vulnerability. But that helps to diminish the ego that always has to show that we know it all. So to me, that would be another thing, showing vulnerability. Robert, another strategy?
Just to say that under vulnerability, this idea that in our context again, if you become vulnerable, then the people around you think you are weak.
Yeah, how do we manage that? No, but let's pause a bit to see
to unpack
how
that.
do we, because you raised it before in terms of if I say call me Robert, if I relax some of the hierarchical rules, and I've had many people say this. What has been your experience in terms of how do you manage the boundaries to make sure that as you bring down the trappings of leadership and hierarchy, as you show vulnerability, people don't take advantage? What have you both done?
There's a really great quote that I love that says, meekness is not a sign of weakness.
Exactly.
You can be meek, meaning you can be humble, you can be, you don't have to be aggressive all the time and shouting. But the absence of being in people's faces doesn't necessarily mean you are weak.
Yes.
And again, it always comes back to you have to be comfortable in your own skin to say that this is the way I'm going to lead. I won't shout, I won't swear, I won't do all of those things, but I will still own my role and I will still get it. And so for me, if you can't find that confidence in yourself to say, I am a good leader, irrespective of what you even think or how you think I should lead, to me, that's key. Like, I think it starts with you accepting that it's okay to be a leader that doesn't shut. Very, very quickly. When I was doing my PhD, I interviewed this guy because we're looking at how leaders deal with staff.
Okay.
And he's a businessman, owns several businesses. But he was telling me one time that he used to actually fight beat up his staff. And he was very proud of it because he was saying that, listen, this is my business. I've put my money in. I will not let you come and destroy. So he says, Gillian, I used to beat them up. Then he went and studied law, and he said, well, now I have a law degree, so they can come and face me in court. But the whole point is that, in some people's minds, being a leader is being tough, and being tough is even getting to the point that they'll punch their person. And I've seen it. I have seen a leader in front of me one day. He took a paper. He was sitting beside somebody and the guy wasn't getting it. And he took the paper and he whacked him on the head.
Wow.
Sorry.
Just like this.
Just like that. Like literally whacked him because the guy wasn't getting it. And he was not understanding what he was trying to say. And you have to be comfortable in yourself that you don't need to go to that extent to be a good leader.
But what I've also seen that if you are doing that, if once you get comfortable in yourself, it's that when the rubber hits the road and people cross the line, it's about maintaining boundaries.
Exactly.
You are not afraid to hold people to account. That way they will know, as for Gillian, as for Robert, you can call them Robert, but you mess up.
Exactly.
You will see and they will do it with respect.
Exactly.
They will do it with fairness, but they will hold you to account.
Exactly.
Then they start to say, so you can't be, Taaka can say she's made a mistake, but you mess up, she will name it.
Exactly. And for me, that's what being able to mix and match, this idea of when to be vulnerable and be nice and kind, and when to crack the whip, because the idea is when somebody messes up or mistreats you. So for instance, I have had an instance, and it's true experience of had an instance where I had a staff who took the pleasure of whenever we go anywhere where I was the leader of the organization, but the person would essentially take the lead and be the want to be like exactly like I'm the and I always learned that in that space when everything is going, that's not the time to now also have crackheads and that's not the time. So when I go back to the office and I call the person, I was like, do you want to be there?
ED?
Yes, I am very happy to have you. And they said, no, that's not my intention. I was like, well, and then you draw the picture to them, to say,
powerful.
this is it, So then the person's like, oh no, that's not my intention. Even if that's their intention, if you are not able to act and draw the picture to them, they feel like you don't see it and you're okay with you, or you are weak and you can't do anything about it.
You manage the boundary.
You manage the boundary.
You crossed it.
You crossed it, and this is the consequence of crossing that boundary. So that they are always aware and they'll come back and into form. Yes.
So I guess what we're saying that is, as you show vulnerability, to ensure people don't take advantage of it, manage those boundaries with respect, with courtesy, with equity, but manage the boundaries so people don't cross over.
Aware, yes. Yes.
Robert, any other strategies? Another strategy to manage your ego?
Very quickly, just learning how to let go.
Yeah.
And because sometimes, like I said, when I started leading, I realized, look, I also had my way. I wanted things to be done this way. But I realized, you know what? If it's not going to crash, it's not somebody's not going to die. If somebody's just let it go, because
that's a difficult one.
I know.
Because sometimes you want things to be
you have your standard and you want
it, and if it's not my way.
But I realized that, you see, we bring all different people into the space. They bring different experience from different spaces, and acknowledging and seeing that. So, for instance, I review my colleague's document, and when I say, okay, if it is in the format, if it is this, if it's that, and your language is right and everything is okay, then let me look at what is there that if we go, it will crash. If there's nothing there, it's fine. Because the point is, we allow people to be more creative. We allow people to have their space. Otherwise, people will start, like we said before, goes, okay, this is how they want it, let it be. And we don't want that. So always letting go, sometimes allows you, it's not everything. That is, like we said, there's the boundaries. There are the times when you have to not let them cross the boundary, but there are the times when you say, oh, this...
Let it be their way.
Yeah, it will not crash. It will not burn.
But unless, because there's this thing about, and I know, Gillian, you've done lots of work around excellence. And I think this is where leaders get very stuck on, it has to be this way. It's if it's about excellence. So to me, it's not if it will crush, if it will not compromise our commitment to excellence, then it can be a different way. So it's getting that shared understanding of what does excellence look like.
Yes, agreeing
on
the
standard,
standards,
standard, so that then we can each come, and then it doesn't have to be my way or the highway. Okay.
One other that I would add is, it's important to create space for people to give feedback and to be able to talk up. And so one strategy, and I learned it from a previous boss, but one of the things he told me is always be the last to speak in a meeting, because I was always the first to speak. Because I always have ideas and questions, and so my mouth would just pop open. But, he really demonstrated, he says, as a leader, be the last to speak, because then it creates the space for people to speak and not feel like they have to agree with you. Because if you haven't spoken, then there's nothing to agree with. So it allows them to talk.
Nice.
And then when they speak, make sure that you hear and you acknowledge everything that they have said, and you don't ever make somebody feel like they're foolish. So don't feel like you have to control all the airtime. Give people room to speak, and then you come in at the end.
Nice. There are apps that can measure how much time people...
Oh, really?
Yes. We do that sometimes from a gender perspective, if you want to make sure that women are speaking as much. So if you're worried as a leader, you're taking too much airtime and you're not giving people room in those, your monthly meetings, your weekly meetings, or whatever it is, just turn on that app and it will record. You can just even use your Otter. Your Otter will tell you
how many times you've spoken.
How many times you've spoken and how much time. All right, so I think another strategy for me is to notice. Remember, I talked about before that I notice my ego comes up when I am afraid. So it's noticing when you're triggered. Because when you're triggered, your ego's so connected to, I always feel like your older brain, I don't know, I'm not a neuroscientist, that when you're afraid of something, then all of a sudden it's like you're threatened. I notice I'm a lot more giving, supportive as a leader when I am feeling remember, secure. When I'm insecure, then I'm trying to prove. That's when I take more airtime. That's when I'm all of a sudden trying to say it must be my way or the highway. So noticing when you're triggered, that's usually a sign that your ego is in hyperinflation state, like our currency, rather than our in a healthy state. So that's one. Robert, maybe the last one. What would you say now?
I think building a genuine sense of internal worthiness, this idea around knowing your worth. And knowing who you are. Like, for instance, being vulnerable, like we said, takes the idea of, I understand who I am. I'm not afraid if I tell somebody I don't know this, because I know who I am. I know it doesn't take anything away from me. It keeps me who I am. I don't lose anything by the idea of showing people that I'm vulnerable. And the only way you can do that is if you know your worth. If you understand who you are, and you know that in every other way I'm good. Maybe it's this way that I don't know. So knowing that alone is important. So, it's this that I don't know. So I'm happy to learn. But otherwise, I am whole. I am good. I am somebody who understands who I am. Like, for instance, as Taaka is saying, you know when you are triggered.
Yes.
So you are able to use it because you know that this is who I am.
Yes.
Nobody is going to tell you or give you another perspective of who you are.
Yes.
And so that is a key thing, that people must learn how to know themselves. Be worthy of yourself, so that people do not pull you down in that state and bring you to a point where you have to be getting to your hyper ego to prove who you are.
This is so deep. I want us to spend a minute on this, because I think this might be the foundation. This building an internal sense of worthiness. I find for many of us, and this is something I struggle with, our worthiness is built on things outside of us.
Exactly.
So for many of us leaders, we're high achievers. So I am worthy if or when. I'm worthy if I've achieved. I'm worthy if I have this title.
Exactly.
I'm worthy if I have done this. And so if any of those things outside of us get threatened, that's why for many people, when they insist on the doctor, my worthiness is wrapped up in my PhD title.
Exactly.
My worthiness, you've had people say, I am Mrs. So-and-so,
Exactly.
call me Mrs. So-and-so. Because my worthiness is wrapped up in my marital status. And so we're saying all of these things, your PhD is something to be commended. Your marriage is something to be celebrated. But I think this thing about internal worthiness is saying, I am enough, full stop.
Exactly.
And how do I develop a sense of inner worthiness that's unconditional? Because as long as it's conditional on something outside of me, then I spend so much time to prove that I am worthy.
Exactly.
But these are things that seem very airy-fairy. I mean, what does that look like concretely? What are things? I mean, I'm imagining it starts with self-awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To start to know, like I can start to say, what are the things? How do I know? And what are the things that I have? It's almost like I've taken my worthiness and put it outside of me here.
Exactly.
That I only feel good about myself. Literally completing that sentence will give you an indication.
Exactly.
I am good enough when. You will know that you've conditioned it on
Exactly.
that. I'm good enough when so that somebody says, if I'm not going to be the executive director, then I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I no longer have value. And so I think that becomes key. Developing that unconditional worthiness, self-love, and acceptance becomes key. Any thoughts, Gillian?
Yes, I think maybe what I would say or add to that is start off by saying, one, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done.
Yes.
Because so many of us have come from so many different backgrounds, experiences, all of these things that really make you have to dig deep to be comfortable in your skin. Sometimes we don't feel like we are worthy just based on the color of our skin.
Yes.
Sometimes it's based on the gender. And I have seen time and time again from a leadership perspective where I've sat in boardrooms, men and women, and the woman might as well be wallflowers. They don't speak. And it is because even though they have a seat at the table, they don't know how to use it. They don't feel they are worthy of being in that room.
Yes.
So step one, I think, for me is you have to acknowledge that it is not easy, and you are not less of a person if you don't feel like you're your full person immediately. It is something that takes time. It is something that you have to work on. And you can actually work on it by identifying the areas that you think you are weak or you think you need strengthening, and strengthen them. You know, so one of the things that I have found is that people tend to get defensive, or they don't feel like they're worthy when they lack knowledge. So you step into a room and, you know, everybody's talking about whatever topic it is. You are unable to talk, so suddenly you get defensive and think people maybe don't like you, or they don't have something, or they have something against you. You can practically work on your sense of self by self-assessing, and then the areas that you are weak in, you work on them over time. Because if you go back into that same meeting and suddenly you know way more than you did the last time, that alone will give you confidence in that setting.
Yes.
So I think too many times we lack that sense of self-worth, but we don't want to put in the work to increase it. So we rather find ways to blame people or things around to say, it's them, it's not me. And it's not easy, but for me personally, Gillian speaking, I have found that adding value, when you bring value to a situation, people stop seeing color of skin, they stop seeing gender. They're all, and this comes from working in Canada for more than 15 years. And I used to be like the only black person in a massive company of white people. But when you bring value, suddenly it's not black. They stop seeing black and white and man and woman, because they see the value that you bring. It's not always that easy.
Yes. And we have to name it. We have to name that.
Exactly,
But patriarchy is real.
Yes.
Racism
These
is
things are real.
Yeah.
These things are very real. But what I always have an issue with is the person who, instead of adding value, uses it as a crutch to explain why they didn't get this or that, or so you can have two people in the same situation with very different experiences based on their mindset.
I wanted to talk about the value, but say that yes, the value that you bring but also valuing yourself and what you already have.
Yes, I love that.
You know, because the idea around, for me, anywhere I go, I know what I have. I know it's good, I love it. I love the fact that I can do A, I can do B, I can do C. So if I come to a room where I know that there are things in here that I can do, well, maybe I don't fit here. Let me go somewhere that, you know, where.
And that's important, being able to take yourself out of the situation if it's not for you.
And the only way you can do that is if you value what you have. If you value your color. I am always, I mean, wherever I go, I'm like, hey, I'm dark, and I make sure that people see that I'm dark, and you know, and whenever I go to any space where they are all other colors and other, I also make sure that I show that I'm here, you know, and because I value myself, I value my color, my eyes, my everybody, everything around me, I love. So I think that is the way that will make people feel, even when you enter a room, the way you show up, make people value you. If you sit up, if you are talking to people and you're comfortable with yourself, people feel comfortable coming to you. You know, you don't need to.
They can spot it when you are not confident. They can spot it from and it turns them off. It actually turns them off, and suddenly they treat you exactly how you are projecting and seeing yourself.
So if you don't show the value, and rather you put, like we are saying, you put the value on other things to make you feel valued, then at a point in time you need to have the inflated ego to make people see those other values. But already if you value yourself and you come into a room and people love you and people say, oh, this, everybody wants to come towards you, you don't need to rather now become that person that has to shout or has to, you know. So that's what I think, that the value should be in yourself, valuing what you have and what you bring, so that if those people don't put value on that, you know that this is valuable. Maybe A will value it. Let me take it there.
Oh, what a juicy conversation. This last one, I wish they would teach more in business schools and other formal leadership programs, this thing about that self-worthiness, that self-love. But folks, I hope we've shared, I think it's been 7 strategies we've shared. So, and I hope you're taking away, noting them down. The first one, Robert, you shared, was really rethinking your paradigm and your understanding of leadership. Not just yours, but also the team around you. The second Gillian talked about was about how you ask for feedback. Mind your face. Those of you who remember Gillian used to squeeze her face. So mind your face, but ask for feedback. That was the second.
And receive it
and
when
receive
you
it
get
well.
it.
Yes, receive it well when you
yes.
get it. Huh? The third was around showing vulnerability. And we talked about, I know many of you have said, but if I show vulnerability, they'll take advantage of me. We've talked about how you can show vulnerability that's not weakness and still manage boundaries. Huh? Then we talked about strategy number 4 was letting go. You don't always have to be right. It doesn't always have to be your way. As long as you're committed to standards of excellence, let others do it also. That was strategy number 4. Number 5 that Gillian shared was about creating airtime for others. So it don't hog the space. Don't always be talking. Give others room to think, speak, and talk. The 6th one is that I shared was notice when you're triggered. It means your ego is in hypervigilant mode, like our currencies, as I said, hyperinflated. And the last one, which is probably the foundation and probably also the hardest, was around self-worthiness, self-acceptance, and self-love, and bringing value to the table. Amazing. So thank you, the squad. We've had a full team in house. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. As always, I end with 3 requests. Number 1, please subscribe, so you don't miss any episode. The second, if you found this useful, a leader who you really think this one has an inflated ego and needs to hear this. Please do share. Or maybe their ego is not big enough. Please share this with others. And the third one, would love to hear your feedback. Rate the show, review it. Let us know what is the one thing you will do differently as a result of listening to the show. So thank you all so much and see you next time. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. See you.
Bye.
Ciao. Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other amazing leaders. See you soon. Ciao.